first round of the Absolute Beginners League season has been dominated by none other than the reigning champion, as Phillip Hammer started from pole at Road Atlanta and claimed victory along with the fastest lap by a significant margin, whilst David Burns and Johan van den Belt fought tooth and nail for P2, with only a few hundred separating the two at the line. Today, Hammer seeks to continue where he left off as the drivers head to Alabama for round 2 of the Absolute Beginners League, and you'll see it all live here on the Global SimRacing Channel. Hi, I'm Thomas Mengozzi, and with me in the booth is Ossian Puhaka. Behind the scenes is our director Joe Peak, and he's using cameras provided by Dougie Beard. The championship makes the trek to Alabama's Barber Motorsports Park for today, with many elevation changes featured across the 16-turn, 2.38-mile circuit. Let's head over to our track guide to learn more.
Welcome to Barber Motorsports Park. Located just east of Birmingham, Alabama, this is one of the newer circuits in American road racing. The track was built in 2003 by George Barber to go along with his Barber Vintage Motorsports Museum, which can be seen appropriately from Museum Corner on the track. While the main circuit is the full course, which includes 16 turns over roughly 2.25 miles, there are also two lesser used layouts called the Short A and Short B courses. The track is known for its technical layout and hugely dramatic elevation changes. In every category of racing, it carries a reputation of making overtakes difficult. That's not to say it's impossible, with most passes happening into Charlotte's Web. Named for the spider sculpture outside the hairpin, it often suckers drivers into braking too deep with the sudden drop just as you attempt to slow the car down. That's not the most challenging part of the circuit, though. Museum Corner is reminiscent of turns like the Corkscrew, with its blind entry, multiple apexes, and cliff-like plunge down a hill. IndyCar and IMSA have visited many times in the past decade, while motorcycle racing is also a regular staple here. Practice and precision are usually required to be able to find a fast lap, but there's a heavy dose of bravery also needed in a number of spots. Despite the track being very wide, accidents often collect multiple cars due to the lack of visibility over crests. All in all, this place proves tough to even seasoned veterans. But with the hillsides and trees providing beautiful natural viewing spaces and an immaculate facility, it's no wonder fans keep showing up in droves to watch the racing here.
So there you have it, your guide to the Barber Motorsports Park circuit here in Leeds, Alabama. 16 turns, 2.38-mile circuit. A really fearsome track, this, potentially for the upcoming race here in the Absolute Beginner Series. Ozzy?
Yes, exactly, Thomas. And one of the key places to watch out here, especially with the Skip Barber, is the Museum Corner, because it's a downhill SS section essentially that keeps on tightening. Exit will be paramount there, because the next corners are almost flat out. So that's going to be something that's really determining whether or not you can make an overtake here, as well as another key thing with Barber Motorsports Park, which is the penultimate corner that feels like it tightens and tightens and tightens. So those are the two key places to watch out for, and main overtaking opportunities. You'll have to make your own luck here. It's a real racer's track, and I think I like it with this car.
Yeah, also, as I said a little bit earlier on with the elevation changes, it really adds a real cachet to this track. Before we go any further, let's take a look at the championship standings here after round number 1. Phillip Hammer, having taken the overall win at Road Atlanta, takes the lead of the standings with 27 points. David J. Burns in 22 points for just 2 thousandths at the line in front of Johan van den Belt. 22 points for David J. Burns in front of Johan van den Belt with 20 points. Neil Bamber currently in P4 with 18 points and 16 points for Marcel Brunschwiller, currently completing the top 5.
Indeed, and for the team standings, we have Evolve Motorsport in the lead with 2 Stupid Dogs in second place. I do love that team name. iRacing UK Lime rounding out the top 3 in points, with NHR Esports in 4th and ABO Racing in 5th place. So it's still tight, but the season is still young.
Still a young season, 1 down, 4 to go. Here are your race details for today's race. 50-minute race, open setup, 2 fuel stops required, and of course 1 spare car available in case one of the drivers ends up in a wall with irreparable damage. Now, before we move on to qualifying, make sure to check out, of course, our sponsor, the Majors Garage, the home of free Baseline Plus setups. Get help from any of the garage coaches 24/7. Sign up now for more awesome, affordable monthly subscriptions, telemetry, coaching, and more by simply clicking on our link in the description below. Also, if you use use our special discount code MajorsGSRC, you'll get 10% off. And so we are indeed about to get started here with qualifying. The session has just started and the drivers are making their way out of the pits. Now, compared to what we saw in Road Atlanta, where we saw many people trying to use the slipstream as much as they can on the backstretch, how much slipstreaming, how much dicing around do you think Aussie is going to actually go down in terms of actually getting track position favorable for getting a good time in qualifying?
Well, I don't think there's going to be too much. Maybe something with the teammates, with teammates trying to draft each other, trying to find if they can get time gained that way, couple of tenths of a second. We're certainly seeing some duos, but it's not the kind of a draft track, not traditionally at least. So even if there's no dirty air with these little skippies, clean air is going to be important in terms of being able to pick your racing line very well. And also when you're drafting somebody and when you're trying to follow somebody, it's very important that they don't slow you down. And in terms of clean places to make a pass, there are few and far between. So it's not going to be clean draft truck, something like, not like Monza or even Sebring with these cars, but there might be some going on depending on how wily you feel. However, in general, I think these drivers might be quite proud in their own ability to put in a clean lap without assistance from anyone else, or at least that's my take.
In the meantime, we see one of the drivers having spun as we're currently following Henrik Kamara in the number 104 car. We saw a little bit earlier Phillip Hammer, the championship leader, getting some heat into his tires, weaving in and out of the track, as we see Henrik Kamara also currently getting some trying to string a lap together. Oh, and he spins right at the finish line and heads into the wall. That's going to be a nose broken here, and even more damage as we're currently following with the number 28 Wojciech Podjacek.
Yes, so let's see how the Polish driver does with the 28 car, a livery very reminiscent of Formula 1 in the 90s, or indeed rally racing in the 80s. I remember that cigarette brand livery adoring many a Porsche as well as an Opel Manta. Anyone remember Henri Toivonen? I do. But, so let's see how our Polish driver is currently doing with that car. So he's currently in 12th place and doesn't really have a time posted as of yet. So it's still early days. It's still early days in terms of setting up times, in terms of trying to make it through. And mind you, if somebody doesn't set a time in qualifying, I think their grid positions will go according to their I rating. So higher your I rating, the further up you are in the grid, but don't quote me on that one. Cutting it nicely and getting some draft as well, so that's very good. He's getting draft from Andrei Selander, and that might be important in terms of the lap time, because he certainly is close enough. Let's see, Tom, how he does on the rest of his lap.
Bit of a slide there before being on the way to turn 14, turn 15. You can see the radius continuing to tighten the corner, seemingly going on forever before finally changing the direction to the left-hand side for the final corner, all the way in a slide, taking a bit of slip there, a bit of curve on the way out. What's going to be the first lap for Wojciech Podjacek? Let's see. Across the line he will go. It will be a 1:37.456 for the Polish driver, who takes provisional pole, immediately beaten by David J. Burns with a 37.388.
Yeah, so times are very close to each other in qualifying as of right now. Only the first lap's through, but a very good time for Wojciech. And David beating him only by half a tenth. Then we go down to 37.5s as Phillip Hammer now takes the provisional pole with a 36.7. So the championship leader, Tom, he looks to be in form here today as well.
Indeed, 36.7, managing to get the first position so far, provisional pole position here for Phillip Hammer, with David J. Burns once again at 0.388. Let's take a look at the number 107, Jeff Randall, currently sitting on a 37.506, not that far off from the time from Podjacek and Burns, so he can still very much try to contend for a place on the front row here.
Yeah, he will, and his number reminds me of the 107% rule in Formula 1. And look at the livery. He's racing with that classic Lotus style of livery. I'm, of course, a big fan of the classic Lotus cars, so very reminiscent of those. Even says Team Lotus on the side. Let's see if he can find the pace that the Lotus cars had on the 60s and 70s, or whether this is going to be a performance akin to the early 90s Lotus teams, maybe. taking very nice line through the penultimate corner and getting it turned in nicely on the last one as well. I can't put it into words how difficult that duo of corners is, because you have to hold it tight on the tightening corner, and then you have to get the last turn just right. So it's very, very difficult, and that last corner, it seems like it always tries to run away from you. So you're either going there too slow and you're going to be frustrated with yourself, or you're going to be running wide. So it's very difficult to get right. But since this is a series more for the newcomers, well, not quite newcomers, but people who are trying to get to grips with iRacing, I think this track is a great teaching tool.
In the meantime, whilst we were talking, we also saw Jeff Randall post a 1:37.162, moving up to P4, whilst David J. Burns and Dan Schuring have moved into the low 137s. 137.026 for David Burns in second position, and 0.108 for David Schuring in P3. Not so... times are driving pretty nicely, even though we still see a 3/10 gap between first and second here in favor of Phillip Hammer with that 136.7.
Yep, they are getting closer and closer, but not quite close enough yet. So Phillip Hammer still in the lead. That is quite a drawback as we move back to the number 28, sliding once again over the hills, and that's what these cars will do, Tom, here, because you look at those tires, they are not slick tires at all. They are kind of like groove tires, more road tires than racing tires, and with those wings doing little more than basically making their vain attempt at creating downforce. It's a car that will love to go sideways, even with the open differential.
As we see the pole position finally changing hands, and Wojtek Podacek with a 136.663 taking the lead, and David J. Burns with a 136.7 taking second spot, and Phillip Hammer dropping down from first to third in the space of a few laps, as we also see Johan van der Belt improving to P6 with a 137.270. So yeah, as we're edging towards the final piece of the final few minutes of qualifying, less than 3 minutes remaining, drivers are starting to get their act together and starting to post some impressive times.
They are. I wonder if the track is improving. I wonder if there's more cloud cover, if the track's getting colder, or whether they are just finding more grip out there, because we are at morning. It's 8:43 virtual standard time, and that means it should theoretically get warmer. Of course, on iRacing here, the colder the track, the faster you will generally go. But track grip, also the rubber on the track, will have an effect on that as well. So it's a complicated thing. I think it's more about drivers getting the grips with this one, Tom, really, as the qualifying goes on. They don't have too much time anymore, so I think one more lap maybe to go with these drivers, and then they are through with their qualifying and see where they line up on the grid.
Indeed, the final few attempts are slowly coming up. You saw the weather conditions up at the top of the screen briefly. Partly cloudy, 19 degrees in the air, 23 degrees on the track here at Barber Motorsports Park as we're heading into the final minute and 40 seconds of qualifying. The last few laps currently being driven. Currently still Wojtek Podacek in the lead. Immediately beaten by Jeff Randall with a new fastest lap pole position for the number 107 with a 136.544, displacing Wojtek Podacek into second position. Phillip Hammer rounding out the final corner. What can he do? What can he bring to the party here in this qualifying session? Let's see at the line. It is going to be a 0.325, immediately beaten by... Well, I said immediately beaten by Michael Haflitzen, but no, it was indeed pole position for Phillip Hammer with a 0.326. Michael Haflitzen with a 0.435, moving up to second. Jeff Randall displaced to third. It's all really kicking off here in this final minute.
It is. Drivers are improving and improving. It's a mark of a good qualifying session. Look how close they are up front. Hammer has been really good this season, but he's been challenged now by Michael Haflidason, I think that is. That reminds me of a old Norse-style surname almost. I wonder if he has some Viking blood in him, and if so, did they finally discover North America, or should I say rediscover?
In the meantime, you can see Josh Brain currently navigating the track with the number 946, currently sitting in P12 with a 1:37.421, driving the Braun Grand Prix inspired livery. I was actually one of the big fans of the Braun Grand Prix car way back when it actually ran in single season in 2009. Of course, Jenson Button taking the championship that year, and it does look pretty slick here on this Skip Barber car as we're rounding out the final corner pretty much here for Josh Brain. Is he going to be able to improve on his 37.421? Phillip Hammer, in the meantime, still staying on the 0.326. Jeff Randall improving to second with a 0.418. What is Josh Brain's time at the line? It will be an improvement to a 0.223, sending him up to P10.
Yeah, that is a good time. Let's see how Seifert will do on his last lap. He improves 2 to a 36.7, but the time was deleted, so that's going to be an off-track infraction. And meanwhile, Phillip Hammer, just, I guess, I know it's an old cliche, but it's Hammer time here with a 36.0, really stomping on everybody. But there are still some drivers who have a chance to challenge on their final laps.
Indeed. Henrik Kamara, meanwhile, moving up to P13 with a 0.251 to his name, the Finnish driver. In the meantime, Niko Heinen rounding out the penultimate corner. He's heading straight to the pits, not an improvement so far, so he will start in P18, staying P18 so far in this qualifying session. The last of the drivers to have posted a qualifying time. Tony Hayes currently still in the pits and not having set a time.
Yep, and I wonder if they want to start from the back in that case, like thinking it's maybe safer to start from the back. Maybe they have some issues they want to resolve. There are multiple reasons that one might start from the back with. Usually it's just wanting to take it easy on the first laps and not get caught up in the shenanigans that might happen in the midfield.
Indeed. In the meanwhile, David J. Burns, along with Wojciech Podacek, I think it is, in the number 28. 0.360 for David J. Burns, moving up to P4, whilst Wojciech Podacek doesn't seem to have any time improvement on the board. He will this stay in third position, as you see the number 125 stopping on track. And the qualifying session has thus ended with Phillip Hammer taking pole position with a 136.038. So here is your starting grid for this race. Phillip Hammer in the first position, then Jeff Randall completing row 1 with a 0.104, Wojciech Podacek and David J. Burns on row 2. Row 3 comprised of Michael Haflitzen and Johan van den Bel. Row 4 comprised of Terry McGrother and Andre Selander. Row 5 will be comprised of Dan Schuring in 9th and Thorsten Seifert in P10.
Yes, and in the second page we have Marshall Brunspiller and Josh Brain, Henrik Kamara and JT Koppinen, or I should say JT Koppinen, because he's Finnish, starting 14th. Johan Dorsers and Fredrik Neptune in row number 8. Denabaus and Niko Heinen starting in row number 9, and Tony Hayes without a qualifying time in row number 10. Thomas, it's going to be a very intriguing race here.
This race is definitely going to be very intriguing indeed, as we are getting soon set up. We are currently under gridding here for the race. We're waiting for the drivers to grid. Remember, 15-minute lap race, 2 fuel stops required, and open setup here, and a spare car in case for the drivers in case they make a mistake and end up with too much damage. You can see the grid currently forming up nicely here at the start-finish straight here of Barber Motorsports Park.
And it's gonna be interesting to see what happens early on, because traditionally in Skip Barber, because these cars have the Handford device on the back, which means that the draft will be massive. A very familiar thing for anyone who has raced these little cars. That means that early on you might not want to battle too much in front. Instead, you want to utilize that draft to try and get away together. So that's gonna be something to watch out for here as we get ready to the start.
We are indeed getting ready to the start. The number 170, you can see Jeff Randall starting in second position with Phillip Hammer, of course, the pole sitter, on the right-hand side of the screen, on the inside of the track. I was wondering, is there kind of like a dirty side of the track here at Barber? Is there really like a side that works better off the start line?
Not in start line, no. It starts to form later on.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are getting started. The red lights are on, the revs rise, and ladies and gentlemen, we are racing here at Barber Motorsports Park for round 2 of the Absolute Beginner Series. Good start from everybody here on the grid. Currently, Phillip Hammer maintaining pole position into turn number 1, although Jeff Randall trying to make a move, trying to set himself up to intimidate maybe Phillip Hammer into turn 2. The car sliding about as they're funneling down that second corner all the way down before moving up onto the rise. Wojciech Podacek currently still sitting in P3 with David J. Burns currently still very much in P4, right within the gearbox of Wojtek Podacek, whilst Michael Haffelson trying to make a move. Oh my god, manages to catch it. Does he? He's able to avoid contact. Yes, he is, but he's going to lose a couple of positions to Johan van der Belle, potentially Terry McGrowther, after managing to save it before breaking for the hairpin there. Really big save by Michael Haffelson. Haflidassen, rather.
Yeah, it was an excellent save. He locked up the brakes completely, lost the car, but then managed to lock up the brakes and avoid all the other vehicles, which was very impressive here on lap 1. And very good too, because otherwise there might have been a major accident involving all the cars that were pretty much behind them. It's not a very wide racetrack even for these cars, so it might have been hard to avoid them coming into the corner, but a clean first lap so far, and that's what you like to see.
We always like to see clean starts here, and so far we have not been disappointed. In the meantime, Wojtek Podacek trying to make a move, trying to intimidate Jeff Randall for second position. In the meantime, Phillip Hammer very much putting the hammer down, pardon the pun, trying to make a run for freedom up front, trying to widen the gap here as he pulls a 7/10 gap before the final corner and the end of lap number 1. So the standings as they are: Hammer, Randall, Podacek, Burns, Beld, McGrowther, Haflidassen, Salander, Schüring, and Brunschwiller. Meanwhile, we see a scrap here with McGrowther, I think it is. McGrowther and Haflidassen, also Salander. Oh my god, going a bit wide and a bit of a contact, I think, on the back of Salander, I think it was, in the black car. In the meantime, we're on board with Salander, who was actually just behind. It is Haflidassen just up ahead along with McGrowther. They're going side by side almost towards the hairpin. Haflidassen having a bit of an advantage. Under braking, it's going very close to actually have a little nibble of the left rear of McGrowther, but it's still very much kept clean. Although McGrowther, again, a little bit wide going into T1, and yeah, he's lost the position, although he's trying to recoup it before the braking into Museum Corner right here. Moving up onto the 81, McGrowther, can he make the move stick? He's going to have the inside, and that is very nicely done for the AAA driver.
Yeah, you can see how the track sort of drops away from them. And you can also see how the leading pack gets away from them as they're battling. This is what I was trying to talk about before the start, or talking about before the start, is that it's going to be paramount to keep these leading pack inside, because they're just trying to get away, whereas these guys who are busy fighting are dropping time. So even if we are only on lap 2, you can see they're already lost a couple of seconds to the leading pack, and here we go once again.
Yeah, it's not over. Haflidassen trying to make it, and is stuck into the inside into the penultimate corner there. McGrowther forced out wide. Oh my god, it's always hacksawing the wheel. It seems like catching the front back again as the car tries to step out, and Haflidassen makes the move stick, takes a bit of grass on the way out. That's going to be giving a bit more speed to McGrowther. Is he going to make the move towards the inside? Is he going to swerve over to the inside of the track? No, but the 140 of Salander is having a little bit of a thought about it, showing himself in the mirror potentially before T1, where McGrowther is trying to keep up with Haflidassen against Salander, looking very close and very poised. And just behind it, then Schüring as well, not too far off to potentially make up a position here.
No, not at all. And well, I'm looking at Michael Haflidassen, who has now gained the leading position in that pack, 6th position overall, and he just mentioned something over on the radio on the main straight, and I think the message was that, okay, let's not battle too much. The pack ahead of us is getting away. Meanwhile, Haflidassen trying very hard. You saw that early on, both in the last corner and in the first corner, dropping the rear wheels onto the grass. And that's just telling me that he's pushing really hard already. Now, this is a 50-minute race, so that means there is still plenty of time to make up ground. But you don't want to lose too much early on, because in racing, if you lose too much time, the drivers around you might be thinking, this guy doesn't have the pace to catch up to the pack. So instead of following you, they start to race you, and that's when you drop even more time. It's a psychological battle as well as a racing battle on the track.
Indeed. In the meantime, Phillip Hammer very much pulling the gap up front, 1.2 seconds, 1.3 seconds even, compared to the next follower, which is currently Jeff Randall, followed closely by Podacek and Burns. We see a couple, following the leader, a couple of three-car trains, so to speak, with Randall, Podacek, and Burns from 2nd to 4th, and then Van der Belt a little bit alone in his corner, followed by Haflidassen, McGrowther, and Salander. Salander catching up and having left a little bit of distance versus Schüring there at the start-finish straight as we're heading up to the next lap.
Yes, and Phillip Hammer really putting on those fastest laps right now, putting the challenge on the Randall and Co. to try and catch up to him. And it's if you're watching Tour de France, which I believe many of our viewers have watched, we have the leader trying to break away early on, but instead of using his stamina, his strength to break away, what he's doing is he's using fuel, because we will have pit stops in this race, and he's using more fuel to try and get away, but that means a longer pit stop for him, because he has to also refill more fuel and he has to come in earlier. So it's gonna be a bet on the pace for Phillip Hammer, that he will try and get away on raw pace alone and make up the time that he will lose in the pit lane. Meanwhile, the second pack, Randall, Potocek, Burns and Beld, they are more concerned about their relative positions, not too concerned about battling, but their relative positions. Meanwhile, back in the mid-pack, they are battling.
Indeed. Phillip Hammer trying to play a little bit the hare here, trying to impose his pace on everyone else, whilst the rest are trying to judge it a little bit more carefully. Oh, two wheels on the grass there for Van der Bel, managing to catch it before the penultimate corner. That could have gone very south, very fast for Van der Bel here, managing to keep out the tail of David J. Burns. So we now have a 4-car train after being left a little bit behind the previous lap. Van der Bel can try to take advantage of the little draft that there can be here with those skippies to try and get some fuel saving potentially happening. As you can see, David J. Burns trying to attack a bit up front to catch up to Potocek. And in the meantime, it seems as though Selander has been left behind quite significantly, although Hafnidason going wide, allowing McGrouther to slide up the inside of the corner. It's going to be really close. They're going to be neck and neck as they're going to be making their way towards the hairpin. Now McGrouther on the outside. He has more speed and we will make the move stick, and thus will get the position away from Haflidason, moving up to P6.
Yeah, and I think what happened there was they were trying to follow number 81, Haflidason, a couple of laps around this track, see if he has the pace to make up the time. Well, he didn't have the pace. Instead, what was happening is that he was making mistakes. He was going very sideways. I was watching him from time to time coming onto the main straight from the commentary booth window in a cloud of smoke, essentially. And with these underpowered skip Barber machines only having about 150 horsepower, it's not the fastest way to go. You don't want to go sideways because that means you're not going forward. And he was losing momentum, and finally they realized that, okay, I best not be leading this pack, it should be somebody else. And right now, it's Terry McGrouther in that 888 car. Let's see if he can do a better job of leading this pack potentially closer to the one ahead of them. But right now they're 3 seconds behind, and it looks like they might have to battle it out for the 6th position instead of having a chance to fight for the podium here. But mind you, the race is still young, so nothing has been decided yet. Early on, it's looking to be a very compelling race, Thomas.
Yeah, it looks very compelling indeed. And yeah, remember, we still have 2 fuel stops to go here in this race. In the meantime, Phillip Hammer continues to pull the gap up front, 2.3, 2.4 seconds now for the championship leader up front. And in the meantime, it's still very much a close pack of cars behind them with it's very much a close pack of cars a little bit further behind with Jeff Randall still being followed closely by Potocek with David J. Burns right there, as well as Van der Belt. So yeah, we still have a P2 to P5 group, and it's still very much alive, although we see a battling for positions here between Marcel Brunschwiller and Dan Scheuring, with Brunschwiller and Scheuring going side by side. And it's going to be advantage to Scheuring before the braking zone for Museum Corner, moving up to P9. I was going to try to get a little bit of a focus on the pack that is behind them, because behind McGrouther, Haflidason, and Selander, we see a few people swapping for positions. We see Dan Scheuring, we also see Brunschwiller. Josh Brain is also not that far off. He can try to keep a far eye on the proceedings, try to spot a mistake, maybe try to pressure them. He's waiting to pounce. And then a little bit further behind, we also see Thorsten Seefeld in P12.
We do, and they are doing a very good job of keeping the battle clean so far. We saw Seifert actually behind Josh Brain. We're following this back here and going a little bit loose, and you can see them once again hitting the grass just a little bit on the entry of the corner. So they're really pushing it to the limit. That's what you are doing when you put one wheel on the grass. You're pushing the limits. You're trying to make use of all the racing space available and Tensam, and that was Thorsten Seifert you saw in the background of the picture as we have a battle for the lead of this pack, which is for the 6th place. You saw Seifert in the back of the picture having a bit of a wiggle, and that's once again one of those things that will happen very easily on the last corner. When you get the racing line just a little bit wrong, you slide out a little bit wide, you touch the grass, and with the open differential on these cars, there is no limited slip differential, there's an open diff. With these cars, it can easily lead to trouble, as we have a great battle here.
Oh, watch out. Haflidason managing to avoid contact just a bit versus Terry McGrowther. McGrowther shutting the door, forcing Haflidason to try and go down the inside, but he had to back out of it really quickly. Nicely held by Haflidason. He manages to gather it to live another day. Meanwhile, Salander trying to keep the pace of those two up front in P7 and P6. And again, Haflidason looking a little bit impatient, maybe trying to make something happen here.
I think he's trying a little bit too hard right now. He's like, as Randall's number, I think he has about 107% effort. And that's a real problem when you're driving a car that requires momentum. So this is a slow racing car, it requires momentum. It needs you to keep the speed as high as possible in the corners. And Haflidason doesn't really have that. So instead he's trying to push the limits all the time. He's pushing the limits both in braking and when turning into the corner. Now the problem is that he's pushing too hard over the limits, and here you see him coming to the pit lane. He's pushing too hard over the limits. His tires are going to suffer. He's using more fuel, and when you're pushing the limits, that you get into an aggressive mindset. And that's what you don't want as a driver, especially not when your main focus shouldn't be battling for position, but get the fastest lap times possible so early on.
Yeah, indeed. Haflidason going into the pits along with Andre Salander just behind and that followed suit. That will give a little bit of room to breathe to McGrowther, who has a pretty significant gap compared to Dan Scheuring, around 1 second of a gap between the number 888 and number 55 car. Brunschwiller trying to keep tabs on Scheuring, trying to, well, he's biding his time, trying to gauge the race on his own, I'm imagining, trying to maybe set himself up for potentially a move for P7. And in the meantime, up front, well, there was a little bit of a scrap between David J. Burns and Podacek, and yeah, Burns is still very close, and Van der Bel not too far, so again, it's still very much all game on at this early stage of the race anyway.
It is, and you can see the battles here in the mid-pack as well, developing all the time, but from second to fifth, that looks to be very compelling. You got Randall, you got Potacek, you got Burns, you got Van der Belt as well. Those four guys are very close to each other, both in terms of pace and in terms of their relative position on the track, some positions being swapped. Potential pit stops coming up, so the pit strategy is going to be crucial in where they end up in this race. But here, Randall still leading the pack away. Two very classic liveries up front, as I mentioned, and we have another taker on the pit lane now. This is surprising that so many drivers, Thomas, are looking to pit early on, because usually the winning strategy, the key strategy, is to try and pit as late as possible, so there is less fuel to be added to the car, and as such the pit stop is shorter. That is the meta, and it has been the meta for many years, because these drivers are not really changing tires, so there's no point taking an undercut. Instead, the overcut is super powerful, to use the Formula 1 term for it. Now, these drivers pitting early, I can only imagine they are doing so to try and get away from the battle pack that is going on, try and get away from traffic, try and get into some clear air, and then maybe surprise the drivers later on.
Yeah, a little bit of an offset strategy, and yeah, you were explaining it very well. The main aim of the game is to try and extend your stint as much as possible, so that you can maybe have a little bit of a splash and dash towards the end of the final mandatory stop. But here we see pit stops pretty early. We had seen pit stops as early as lap 7 or lap 8, with of course Haflidason, and then of course on the end of lap 8 with McGrowther. In the meantime, Podacek and Randall, things are heating up pretty nicely here. Randall still leading, but Podacek very much chomping up the bit here, trying to potentially make something happen in the penultimate corner. Very good attack on the curb there by Randall. And look at David J. Burns also wanting a piece of the action, and same for Van der Belt. It's very much an accordion here that is still stretching out and then compacting again at each braking zone. But they're looking really close out here, especially with David J. Burns trying to take a little bit of a draft from Podacek as we head into the next lap.
The problem for these guys, as Scheuring makes it to the pit lane, a problem for these guys is, or I wouldn't say that it's a problem, it's more a challenge. It's very difficult to overtake here on Barber. You have so many flowing corners, you have so many fast corners. You don't really have those traditional long draft straights followed by a tight corner. Instead, you have some medium corners. And with these cars going slower, it's double the effect. So they have to really work the overtake over multiple corners. And you can see a different interpretation of the racing line through there, where Randall was taking a really tight and neat exit whereas I think Potocek was sliding a little bit wider. I wonder if that's going to be the case in Museum Corner. Both of the drivers cutting it nicely, getting it turned in, and once again Potocek is sliding just a little bit wider. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think he might have some issues in terms of keeping his car pointed to the right direction, keeping it not neat and tidy. He's once again sliding to the grass, so he's feeling the effect and the pressure of trying to find and maximize his exit, trying to find that overtake. But what I've mentioned from the beginning of this race is that these drivers are not in a hurry yet. Sure, they will take an overtake if they see a chance, but mostly it's about trying to see where your opponent is at, trying to find the weakness in your opponents, gathering information, gathering data, and trying to plan out the overtake, which is going to happen at a later point. And that's why I like that we have 50 minutes here instead of 15 minutes, that they have time to plan it, and it's more than just a sprint race.
Yeah, exactly. Plenty of time to set that up, and you mentioned it well. Lots of really fast flowing corners, which changes the direction left, right, and center. There is not that many big braking points. The big braking points that you can pick are either T1 or the run onto the hairpin, like we see here on screen with Randall, Potocek, and Burns. And those are really the only really key areas where you can overtake. You can maybe try your hand at Museum Corner, but given that you still have to make it through the corner in an X, and you attack too much and you risk losing the car, especially with those tiny tires that we run on the skippies here, it can be a bit of a tall order to actually overtake here, as you pointed out.
It can, but the Museum Corner is one of the places where you can make a daring overtake. You just basically send it to the inside, two wheels on the grass, really hop over the curb, and just force an overtake before the hairpin bit at the end, because you turn right, left, and right. So it's SS, but the track is really widened by those curves. And if you manage to send it to the inside just at the right time, surprise your opponent so that they leave a room on the inside, the racing line will not follow wide to the inside of the last corner, not before you actually turn in. So you have a chance to try and make a move work as Randall takes his chance. Oh, yeah, Randall takes his chance to the pit lane at this moment with 32 minutes left, and we'll see where he will end up.
End of lap 11, then we see Jeff Randall heading into the pits, and he's also followed by, I think it was Brunschwiller. Yeah, Brunschwiller is in, as is Seefeld. So yeah, we are seeing the first few pit stops so far. Counting these people, we have around 10 drivers that have currently made their first of 2 mandatory pit stops. Remember, we have 2 fuel stops to make here in this race. In the meantime, we can follow with Michael Haflidason currently sitting in P12 as the 107 of Randall makes his way out of the pits. But yeah, Haflidason taking advantage of the people that were in the pits. Andre Salander trying to catch up, getting the car pitched all kinds of sideways as Jeff Randall exits just in front of Haflidason. Oh my goodness, that was a bit too close for comfort, was it? The nose would have been snipped.
It was, and I'm surprised Randall dropped that far back, because Haflidason was nowhere near Randall before the pit stop. So it looks like my prediction about the overcut being very powerful may not have been the case, that or Haflidason has really found the pace towards the later portion of this race. You can see a replay here from Haflidason's perspective. He's coming to the first corner. At this point, he should know that he's racing Randall for position, taking a really nice bit of opposite lock into the first corner, trying to make it to the racing line in the second corner, and Randall just cut his nose off. And that's a little bit naughty. He was clear, but personally, if I would have been Randall, I would have maybe just held the outside line, because you still got half an hour remaining, and I think Haflidason's reflexes saved us there, where he was slow enough heading into the corner and it wasn't sliding wide from the apex. Otherwise, we might have had what we coin an unfortunate incident here.
Yeah, that would have been a really expensive nose job indeed for Haflidason. In the meantime, Wojtek Potocek has made his way into the pits, making his first mandatory pit stop. And yeah, Phillip Hammer's yet to come into the pit. Oh, actually, he just comes out of the pits right now. He's also, the leader has already pitted along with Potocek and David J. Burns, as well as number 18 of Van de Belde. And you can see that Jeff Randall and Haflidason are looking pretty good right now, exiting in P2 and P3 right now, with Potacek losing a couple of positions, moving down to P4, whilst Phillip Hammer retains the lead with a 6.4 second advantage.
Yeah, Hammer is having that pace very much going for him early on. But look at this battle here. They're 2 by 2. They're side by side, 2 rows down here from position number 5 onwards, with the triple eight of McGroder then trying to hold back Selander, Belt and Burns heading into the museum corner. And they're gonna have to be careful so that they don't lose sight of Jeff Randall, because Randall, Hafnidason and Potacek would just love to get away from these guys. You always love to get away from the pack behind you, because that means that you have less to lose, essentially. That means that even if you lose this particular battle, you can only drop to 4th place if the pack behind is far enough away. Whereas if you have this huge battle back ranging all the way from the 8th place, well, guess what? One tiny mistake and you're gonna lose a whole lot more positions in a long season. That is going to have an effect, as I think that was Selander making a mistake into the penultimate corner.
Yeah, Selander going a bit wide in the penultimate corner, allowing Johan van der Belt through, and David J. Burns is here to try and take up on the offer, potentially, if there is a bit of a wide exit from the final corner. It does not happen for Selander. Selander will remain in P7 at the present moment, but in the meantime, Haflidason and Randall up front, trying to juking positions left, right, and center, and Potacek looking to get a little piece of the action as well, as Haflidason moves up to P2 at the expense of Jeff Randall. He was looking very impatient over the last part of the lap, and yes, Haflidason making the move stick before T1 and thus inheriting P2, but this comes at the expense of the gap to the leaders. You can see the gap has widened by 1 second between Phillip Hammer and P2 at the present moment, as Terry McGrowther joins in the proverbial battle for P2, making this a 4-car battle for second position.
Yeah, I was thinking McGroder is going to run away and this pack is going to run away from Van der Belt, but Van der Belt is doing a good job of now calming down, letting Selander follow him, letting Burns follow him, and trying to catch back up. And I wonder if these guys fighting for the second place are actually going to fight, or if they've realized the situation and trying to make a run for it. However, the gap, 1.5 seconds, it's right on that line. Is Van der Belt able to follow the draft? Yeah, he's getting a little bit from there, but not too much. And it's gonna be more about Selander and Burns. Are those guys just content with following him, trusting his pace that he will be able to catch back up? Or are they going to, like, doubt it and just settle, okay, we want to take that 6th place, the pack ahead is gone? Or maybe they want to get to the front themselves, try and have a go of trying to catch up, instead of letting Van der Belt try and catch up. So that's one of those things that, once again, in Skip Barber racing is super important. What this series does, Absolute Beginners League does, and what Skip Barber cars in general do, they teach you racecraft. You start with the Mazdas and the Formula Vs, which will tell you how to drive a race car. Then the Skip Barber series is very good at teaching you racecraft, what to do and when to do, your racing intelligence. And we are seeing some good examples of racing intelligence, and we're seeing some bad examples of racing intelligence. I wonder...
Watch out for the move from Growther. Yeah. He wants to stick it to the inside, contact with the 28. Unfortunately, Potacek gets turned around. That's the race completely wrecked there for Potacek. He's going to stop. I'm going to expect left rear suspension damage for the number 28 driver. That is really, really unfortunate. Right at the braking zone for the hairpin. McGrowther, I don't know. I feel like he could have bided his time. They're trying to make a move up the inside of the hairpin. Might not be, he was pretty far when he's trying to make that move. Let's take a little bit of a look here. You can see McGrowther trying to set up the 28. Let's ride on board with him. Tries to make it up the inside. Goes off with the draft now at the 2 board and brakes really, really, really late. He manages to keep it. Not quite. He just runs out of room. He just runs out of room, and the 28 gets turned around. Really unfortunate end to the race there for Potacek. Yeah,
I think as we see another angle of it, what happens here is that I don't think McGroder was aiming to do an overtake there. He was braking late. He lost it a little bit under braking. Look at it. You can see it here, his car wiggle. And he noticed that he was braking too late, trying to force it to the inside to avoid the car in front. And at this point, racecraft. Yes, in terms of racing rules, it was Terry McGroder's fault, 100%, because he was never alongside until they turned into the corner. However, Potacek, once he heard from the spotter that there is car on the inside, he should have been able to look in his mirrors, and he should have given him some more space, noticing that that car is never going to turn in that tight space. So no, it's not Potocek's fault, not at all, but in terms of racecraft, you have to pick your battles, and in this case, it would have been better allow the car on the inside, then have a bit of battle in the museum corner, probably hold tight to Hafli Dawson and Randall, and survive to fight another day. Because if you you have certain rights as a racing driver. If you try to hold on those rights a little bit too tight, then you just end up shouting at the other driver from top of the crash barrier instead of continuing the race. So you have to pick your battles, and sometimes the best move may be to give way even if you don't technically have to.
So yeah, really unfortunate end to the race there for Potocek. And also, in the meantime, we have also lost a Johan van de Belt. I wonder what happened there, but I saw him in the pits with what appears to be the left rear off. So yeah, there was a bit of a moment there for the number 18 car who's out of this race. In the meantime, Phillip Hammer still very much in the lead as we are trying to get a hold of the moment there from Johan van de Belt. Let's see what if we can see anything from what happened here on this replay.
So they're coming to the fast SS section of the track. Oh, and
lots on the curb.
That's a hardware failure. That's a hardware failure going over the curb. I think he went over the curb. You can see the force feedback maybe clipping a little bit. Maybe the wheel just lost connection. You hear the dreadful USB disconnected sound, and the wheel just went straight, and he went straight to the wall. I don't think that was a driving error, because even if that curb is high, it shouldn't upset the Skip Barber so much. So I think that was unfortunately a hardware error for Johan van de Belt there.
That is very, very unfortunate indeed to have that happen. The car just going straight on, and you're just powerless. Just witnessing that car barreling down the road and trying to keep it together, and that's a really unfortunate end to the race there for Johan van de Belt. In the meantime, up front, Phillip Hammer completely undisturbed on his 17th lap. We're already at past the halfway point of the race. 22 minutes and 40 seconds remaining. 8.8 seconds of a gap to Hafli Dawson. And yeah, the momentum has been really going in terms of race pace towards Hammer. Personal best with a 35.502 so far, which is the fastest up of the race, if I'm correct in saying that. Meanwhile, Hafli Dawson behind, 135.9 his personal best, which he drove last lap. So yeah, he still loses around, and compared to the previous lap from Hammer, he still loses about 0.2 of a second compared to the leaders. So we're very much seeing the gap widen in favor of the number 60 car, whilst Randall is trying to catch up to Hafli Dawson and trying to make the fight for second place continue to live on.
It does continue to live on. You're going to see these drivers trying very hard. Meanwhile, we have confirmation from Johan van de Belt himself that it was actually a VR, virtual reality headset, failing in the middle of the corner. So that's very unfortunate, and if you can't see anything, well, you can't really steer, and he did a good job of just going straight and hitting the brakes in order not to cause trouble to anyone else. So this is the fight for the second place, and you can see how Hafli Dawson and Randall are just utilizing every bit and then some of the available racetrack. But I was really curious watching Phillip Hammer earlier on, because Phillip Hammer was driving really, really well. Obviously, he's in the lead with a 9-second lead. How could he not be driving well? And that speed is down to how he is positioning his car, and that's everything here. That's even more crucial with these underpowered cars, because you don't have power to get away with mistakes. So you have to really be clinical with your racing lines. Like at the exit of the museum corner, you saw Hafli Dawson there taking a tight line on the exit, whereas Hammer was utilizing all of the curb, but nothing over it. And that's the key thing. He wasn't using the grass, he was just all the way over the curb, using every single millimeter and making the corners as light as possible, whereas these drivers are constantly making tiny errors. You saw Hafli Dawson there. Yeah, he made a slight error on the entry, got a little bit loose, had to fight the car throughout the corner, and then getting very sideways on the exit and now making it to the pit lane, once again in a bit of an angle.
Making it to the pit lane at a bit of an angle for his second mandatory stop of the race, allowing Jeff Randall to move up into second position. Let's take a little bit of a look from the perspective of Hafli Dawson here. Moving through turn 12, turn 13, pitches the car a little bit too much in. Then onto turn 14, gets a bit wide at the exit of 13 on the grass, and then the grip catching back up before turn 14 just in time. It's not the first time that he's actually been out on the grass there, and he was been very lucky to get it, and then straight dive into the pits for his second pit stop.
Yeah, and you have to be very delicate with the throttle to save a Skip Barber because it's a short car. You don't have the power to get away with slides as you normally do. So when you get it sideways, you lose the grip. The rear tires are going to overheat, especially on the surface, real quick. So you have to kind of like feather the throttle as you're counter-steering, but you can't counter-steer too much because what happens when you counter-steer too much, the car is gonna catch grip and then it's gonna just yeet over to the other side. It's gonna be the pendulum effect, and what is utilized very well in rallying, it's called the Scandinavian Flick. The pendulum effect, effectively utilizing that. Well, in track racing, if you overcorrect a slide, you're gonna end up on the other side and usually in a wall of smoke, end up either spinning or in the barrier. So he did a good job of maintaining his balance, having that sense of balance, and to hold it in a slide instead of overcorrecting it or indeed losing it in any fashion.
And it's a very fine line because it's very easy to lose it, and because you're not exactly driving by the seat of your pants, you're trying to react to visual cues compared to what you would in real life. Because unfortunately, you don't have the G-force; you can't exactly feel the forces going around you, which make it a little bit easier to catch the slide. So yeah, very well done by Haflidason to keep on catching. And as Terry McGrowther moves up into the pits as well, the AAA car making his second mandatory stop of the race. Same for Andre Salander, allowing Marcel Brunschwiller and Josh Brain to move up into P4 and P5 so far on the track. Jeff Randall continues piling on the laps, although the gaps continue to widen in favor of Phillip Hammer. 9.7 seconds. We're almost coming close to the 10-second advantage here in favor of Phillip Hammer, who's driving superbly around Barber right now.
He's just in a class of his own with a 10-second lead over to Jeff Randall. We see the pit stop proceeding, the second pit stop cycle. And the differences are vast because first of the drivers came to the pit lane with about 40 minutes to go, just 20 minutes driven. So yeah, they are hitting their second stops right now, whereas we are expecting the last stops with around 8 to 10 minutes to go. So it will still be 10 minutes before we see how these drivers stack up for the final time and how these drivers are really positioned in real time over the track. Meanwhile, we are watching the maestro in action, Phillip Hammer. Let's jump on board with him maybe. Let's try and analyze this a little bit, Thomas, because he's coming to the last corner. You can see him turning in nice and early, cutting the apex, and then look how he utilizes the exit. Once again, doesn't get too wide, doesn't gonna upset the car, getting it turned nice and tight into the final straight. The start-finish one, getting it turned early. Once again, utilizing the angles. He's not throwing it around, apart from a little bit here, but even when he is at a slide, it's at the minimum angle. He just throws it into a little bit of a slip angle without losing too much power. So that is a sign of a driver who has mastered physics of the car, the handling of the car, and how the car reacts to his tiniest of movements. Again, a little bit of a wiggle on the corner entry. That's actually a bit of a mistake, but he didn't lose too much time there. And I think that might have been due to being in the dirty air or being right behind. I think that's Neptune ahead of him, about to be lapped. So just getting into the corner a little bit faster than usual. And yeah, you can see a great comparison there on how he's using the track versus Neptune. And Neptune just getting away from him. Essentially, he gained half a second in that single corner.
That is very, very interesting to watch Phillip Hammer at work, and you told it so well. Taking advantage of the slip angle, pitching the car in a tiny bit of slip, but only just enough to actually make it around the corner a little bit faster, not going too sideways. Managing to catch the slide here at the top of the hill after 13. Dropping down to P4 to turn 14, and here comes turn 15. You can see the apex just continuing to narrow forever and ever and ever before the final corner. He pitches it a little bit in, nice and easy, nice and smooth exit from Phillip Hammer, who is about to complete the lap number 21 and enter lap number 22 here on this race. 15 minutes left on the clock. And yeah, Phillip Hammer with that particular lap, especially taking advantage of apparently traffic maybe for Jeff Randall. 11.2 seconds of a gap between first and second right now.
Yeah, and you can see here Hafri Dawson in 7th place, who was one of the first pitters there, getting once again a little bit sideways, a little bit too sideways, trying to utilize that track too much. I think if he would just take a couple of % off, if he would just calm down his driving just a little bit, he would be so much faster because he has car control. And that is a very important thing. His car control is excellent. But what he doesn't quite have the grasp yet, and what he can learn throughout this season, maybe if he's watching the broadcast back, is how to keep the car on the straight and narrow. Once again, getting a little bit too sideways, he's trying a little bit too hard, and it's a bit of a miscue, a miscommunication that the later you brake and the more slide you can get, the higher slip angle you can get, the faster you will go. No, that's not it. You can't go faster by trying harder. Instead, with the Skip Barbers, especially because it's such a unique car, you're driving an open wheeler with mechanical grip alone. In that sense, it's kind of like Formula Ford. It's close akin to what we know in Europe as a Formula Ford and other low-end open wheeler cars. So you always have the vertical grip, you have the lateral grip, sorry, and the horizontal grip. So the horizontal grip, the lateral grip gets into effect when you are in the middle of a corner. That's a sideways grip, essentially. So how much you can turn, where is the grip in the middle of a corner, whereas the vertical grip or the lateral grip gets into effect when you are accelerating out of the corner. And the line can get very hazy between those two things. Normally in an open wheeler, you're relying, oh, that's a very massive slide there, running out of both grips there, essentially, but more so the, the horizontal grip, I suppose. So normally in an open wheeler, you're relying on the wings, the aerodynamics in fast corners, and you're relying on the mechanical grip in the slower corners. But here, you're relying on mechanical grip even in the faster corners, to put it bluntly.
Very interesting. We're seeing this on the replay. What has happened to the number 55? Getting a bit pitched in. That does look good so far. Oh! Catches it, got a little bit of a lock towards the left over on the transition there at the exit at turn 13 over the hill, and sends careening off into the barriers. That was a really, really bad crash for Dan Schürling right there. As you can see in the replay, pitching the car into 12, then into 13, trying to catch it, and then all of a sudden, all the way towards the left-hand side, and hits the side on. That's not exactly the worst kind of impact. He can have a front-end impact, and it can be much worse.
Well, it depends on the car, because in a modern open wheeler, you can survive pretty well from a frontal impact, whereas the side doesn't really have that much protection. So it's all about whether you want to hurt your legs or hurt your arms and your abdomen. But what happened there was a classic example of overcorrecting. He felt the car go a little bit sideways, maybe losing the grip bit on the exit of the corner, which is what's going to happen on the exit of a fast corner. You're going to lose the grip because you're utilizing all of the rear tires. You're going to feel it, okay, it's coming a little bit loose. He anticipated it, he corrected the slide, but there was no slide, there was still grip. So he corrected all the way to the left, and it looked silly because it looked like he was just turning all the way to the left for no reason, but I think he was anticipating a slide. There are two explanations. It was either anticipating a slide or a hardware error, because on iRacing, when your hardware gets disconnected, your wheel turns 90 degrees to the left. So it was one or the other, but I'm banking on the fact that he was actually anticipating a slide that never happened, and as such, overreacted to it.
I'm totally with you on that one. We discussed it a little bit earlier. It's very, very much a fine line. Oh my god, the exit of the pits from Josh Brain. I was sorry about that we didn't catch it on camera, but yeah, there was a bit of a close exit from Josh Brain, who got tagged by, I think it was Brunschwiller, who caught him out, and unfortunately tagged wheel. I think it was right rear versus left front between these two. And yeah, we're catching back up to the race up front. Sorry, that was a little bit caught up with some of the events that are following behind him. But yeah, Rendell and Haflidason still battling for P3. Rendell retaking that position, the number 107 back in front of the 81. In the meantime, up front, David J. Burns heading for the pits, and so is Phillip Hammer, the leader, heading for his final pit stop of the race. 10 minutes and 50 seconds left on the clock. Here goes the number 60, stopping at his spot, and David J. Burns in the 125 is just coming towards his spot right now.
Yep, and what a race from Haflidason as well, and we're gonna see a replay soon of what's happened earlier on. So I think this is the incident coming out of the pit lane. Yeah, that's gonna be the brown car, Brain here, getting out of the pit lane. Now let's see from this perspective of what happened. So he's coming out, you can't see anything over the guardrail, which is a real problem here. And I think, yeah, there's an overtake happening heading to the outside, and that's car number 4, which would be, in this case, it would be Marshall Brunschwiller. just going to the outside, trying to make an overtake, getting a little bit wide, and really unfortunate for Josh Brain, who was just minding his own business, getting out of the pit lane and suddenly finding himself in that position. It's very difficult to anticipate. However, if there's a close battle going on and you're coming out of the pit lane, usually the best chance is to just lift off the throttle a little bit, let the battle pass by, because you're still going to catch up to them right away and you can join that battle. But if you join alongside them, they may not be able to anticipate that you are here because they are focused on the battle with each other. So that's, again, one of those awareness things, one of those racecraft things, and one of those things that unfortunately usually can only be taught by bad experiences.
Yeah, effectively, Josh Brain will be reminded of that one, and same from Brunschwiller, both with each with their little piece of takeaway that they can actually get in terms of awareness, as you said. And yeah, for Josh Brain, it must have been pretty surprising to find himself at the outside of T2, with absolutely finding himself without any room to go on the outside, because on the outside there was just the curb on the left-hand side. So yeah, very unfortunate for both Josh Brain and Brunschwiller. Josh Brain, the worst for Ray, having been sent down to P15. And in the meantime, the battle for P2 with Jeff Randall still holding off Aflidason, who's all kinds of sideways. You said himself, maybe attacking a bit too hard, and that's currently potentially being the benefit for David J. Burns, who's still keeping tabs with Aflidason in P3 at the moment, and could try and make a move for third place.
He could, and I think at some point he should, but right now this battle between Randall and Hafridason has been going on for a while throughout this race. They were at it after the first pit stop, and they are at it after the second pit stop. So if you are Burns at this point, following them in fourth place might not be the worst choice. You bide your time, you look to see what happens between them. If something crucial goes down, you are able to pass them with ease, instead of having to fight them individually, because otherwise you might end up getting dragged into the same battle, getting dragged into the fight that you don't necessarily want, and you're just taking an unnecessary risk. So once again, with these skip Barbers, you are really going to have to utilize your racecraft and think on the fly. But as racing drivers, it's easy to say from here in the commentary booth, Thomas, that yeah, you don't want to battle, you don't want to you want to bide it out and see what happens between them and try to nip position on the, if they collide together, or on the last lap maybe trying to make a draft pass. But if you're a racing driver, well, you see a car in front of them, what do? You overtake, or at least try to.
At least try to. Yeah, it's very much primalistic. There are so much parameters that you have to take into account when you're actually racing, that yeah, you don't exactly have time to hang around and try to think about what you are doing. It's only upon review later on, after the race is over, that you can actually try to get a few takeaways for things to work on. In the meantime, It's still very much Jeff Randall still sitting in second position, taking the chance of seeing Haflidason a little bit trying too hard just behind him to pull a gap to P3, and David J. Burns currently waiting to pounce and holding himself in position in P4, as well as Terry McGrowther, who's starting to catch up with the top 2, top 3, top 4 fights. So we're having a 4-car train almost, with a little bit of a distance between McGrowther and Burns. Again, McGrowther towards the inside. No, he decides to back out of it. Maybe a bit of late braking again.
Yeah, maybe a bit of a mistake, maybe a bit of late braking, trying to spook David Burns a little there. It's not a, mind you, it's a valid strategy, trying to spook somebody, trying to get into their head, trying to make them watch their mirrors a little bit too much, because when you're watching your mirrors, you're not watching the racetrack in front of you. When you're not watching the racetrack in front of you, mistakes can happen very easily. At the very least, you miss the apex of the corner, you make a mistake, you open yourself up for an overtaking opportunity down the next straight. Now, you mentioned earlier on about how there are so many parameters you have to watch out for during a race, how there are so many things going on. That's what's called a spare capacity. And that's what separates the good drivers from the great ones. The great ones have spare capacity, in addition to being able to drive a race car on its limit, and sometimes being able to hold on even when it's beyond its limit. They also have time to think, and that comes with experience as well. Once you've done enough practice, these laps, you sort of, your muscle memory will pick up on where to brake, where to turn into the corners, and what's the fastest line. And then your brain opens up, the storage in your brain opens up, the capacity, the processing power in your brain opens up to strategizing, essentially thinking. And not only just driving, but also thinking that, okay, what is the best choice here? Should I just wait behind them? how should I approach this battle, where do I want to make my overtake, all these sort of things that normally the commentators talk about, but the racing drivers think about it a lot as well. The great racing drivers have that spare capacity, good racing drivers necessarily don't.
So, heading towards the final 5 minutes of the race here, you can see on the clock, 4 minutes and 40 seconds remaining. Phillip Hammer continuing to romp and lead the way up front. 18.6, 18.7 seconds of a lead over Jeff Randall. Randall, who is at the lead of a 3 to 4 car train with Hafli Dasson, David J. Burns, and Perry McGrowther, and then a little bit of a fair bit of distance, 11 seconds between McGrowther and Salander in P6 as Jeff Randall is coming up towards a lapped car, I believe, or did they already pass him? I think it was already passed. It was a lapped car indeed, and Randall currently still holding on. Hafli Dasson, as hard as he tries, and he tries to throw all his might, as you can see, trying to break as late as possible into turn 15 and turn 16, trying to carry a bit more speed on the way out. It's just not panning out. A little bit much more sideways compared to Jeff Randall in P2, even though he's managing to keep a pretty good distance. It's still not enough to make an impact, as David J. Burns tried to intimidate Hafli Dasson here in third position.
Yeah, at some point he's got to make a move. Even if you're biding your time, at some point you have to make a move. And that clock, you can see it. Even when you're racing, you know that, okay, there is at most couple of laps left, and it's gonna creep up on you. You're gonna have increasing amounts of pressure as the laps wind down. You're gonna look to the opportunities more closely, and McGrowther there, wow.
McGrowther trying to go for the move on David J. Burns, but misjudges it and takes out Hafli Dasson. Actually, Hafli Dasson is still back on the road, but Hafli Dasson moves down from 3rd to 5th due to an unfortunate late braking, I think, from McGrowther, who was trying to make a move on the number 125 of Burns. Let's see that again here in replay. Watch for the number 888 car behind the 125 with the McLaren livery. Watch this, trying to dart to the inside, brakes, and unfortunately a little bit too close for comfort, and good escape, good recovery by Hafli Dasson, who manages to catch it, get on the grass, and still get back going. I think he was lucky not to get away with damage there.
Yeah, I think his camber angles might be a little bit messed up, but you can see another shot of it here. He's trying to look to the inside, but he's way too late. And Hafli Dasson, meanwhile, Hafli Dasson doesn't know at this point that there's anyone coming from behind him, because how could he? There's one car between them, so he can't spot it easily on the mirrors. And he has already decided to take a tight apex into the corner, so that was just bad luck from Hafli Dasson. He was following Randall, trying to take a tighter apex, trying to potentially make up some ground here, maybe set up for an overtake before or after the museum corner, but instead he was just taken out by McGrowther, who sent it way too deep into the corner. So as a result of that, it's gonna be Hafli Dasson on the receiving end, and he does have some damage, and he has to come back to the pit lane. A heartbreak for him with just less than 2 minutes to go in this race.
Heartbreak indeed, as in the meantime, Jeff Randall steers clear out of that particular battle. Currently, McGrowther holding the P3, but David J. Burns trying to make something happen at the exit of the hairpin, trying to carry a bit more speed on the way out, trying to get side by side with a AAA car as he tries to make a move happen around the outside of Museum Corner. He has to back out of it. McGrowther has got the line towards the inside, and he retains 3rd place for now. In the meantime, Randall takes the opportunity to get away from that fight and trying to secure 2nd place as we're moving on to the final minute of racing here. The final few laps are coming in, and very much not worried by that battle at all. Phillip Hammer again, 21 seconds over Jeff Randall.
He is, and you can see Burns here looking to the outside once again, forcing McGrowther to defend into these fast corners. And now I'm looking to the exit here. See if McGrowther can actually hold on to that line. No, he can't. So we move on to the leader of the race, Phillip Hammer. He's been absolutely phenomenal today, starting his last lap of the race. He's going to get the white flag this time around. And once again, we watch this fight for what is the final podium spot. Randall's getting away from them, but I don't think these guys care too much, because right now it's mano-a-mano. It's McGrowther versus Burns, and may the best driver win.
May the best driver win indeed, as we're heading towards the final moments of this race. McGrowther P3, David J. Burns in P4. J. Burns very much looking to try and make something happen, trying to carry the speed through into turn 2, turn 3, trying to carry as much speed as he can towards the exit, onto the back, onto one of the back stretches here towards the hairpin. Jeff Randall a little bit safer here. McGrowther takes the inside, towards the outside goes David J. Burns potentially trying to go for the cutback at the exit of the hairpin. He's going to try to go around the outside, trying to carry a bit more speed. Oh, the wheels touch, and David J. Burns is on the grass. Really unfortunate there from David J. Burns. McGrowther, not the first time that he's been involved in an incident with contact between two cars. Just the right rear on the left front of David J. Burns was enough to send it on the grass, and the museum corner! McGrowther is off into the sand pit, and that is going to be promoting David J. Burns onto the P3. McGrowther, it seems as though it has taken a toll. He's cracking under pressure now, and he has been sent down to P4. David J. Burns will only be too happy with that, as rounding out the final corner is Phillip Hammer, who has been completely undisturbed over the course of those 50 minutes of races. Started on pole, led almost every single lap. Phillip Hammer wins round 2 of the Absolute Beginners League at Barber Motorsports Park. Here you can see Jeff Randall rounding out the penultimate corner of the final corner. Behind him is David Jabers in the 125. Skip Barber, the number 107 that you see on screen right now, rounds out the final corner, and that will be a well-deserved second place for Jeff Randall. And David J. Burns continues on his good streak after a second place by a few thousandths at Road Atlanta, completes it with a podium finish here at Barber, as we see Randall sending it into the wall there after crossing the finish line.
Yeah, too much money for that team, I think. So we are still watching some other finishers. We have Brunschwiller, we have Dorsers, and we have Seifert fighting it for 8th, 9th, and 10th. So I don't think Dorsers will be close enough to make a move into these final corners unless Brunschwiller makes an absolute mess of them. As the last drivers on the lead lap take the checkered flag, I'll take it back briefly before the break into that incident between Burns and McGrowther, because I think McGrowther thought he was clear, but Burns sneaked up on the outside at the exit of the corner, whereas McGrowther took more of Formula 1 line. And you can see it here actually. You can see Burns is not alongside at this point, and here he came again alongside. McGrowther took all of the exit. So I think it was a matter of McGrowther trying to like hold his line. You can see here how close Burns is to not making the overlap. So briefly, McGrowther is clear, and no, he never actually was really clear. And he thought he would be clear if he makes it to the outside. He thought Burns wouldn't be able to hold it there. He was wrong, and as a result of that, McGrowther, the blame is on you for that one. And then in the next corner, he just overshoots it as a result of the earlier contact. I think he got a little bit flushed by it, and then just overshoots the museum corner and loses the final podium position. So in the end, justice won.
All right, we're going to be back in a few moments after a quick break to debrief that second round here of the Absolute Beginners League. Well, what a race this was here at the Absolute Beginners League for round 2 at the Barber Motorsports Park. Here are the final results for race 2. Phillip Hammer taking his second consecutive win of the season with a winning margin of 23.15 seconds over Jeff Randall in P2. David J. Burns completing the podium with Terry McGrauther and Andre Salander completing the top 5. JT Kopinen, Henrik Kamara, Marcel Brunschwiller, Johan Dorsers, and Torsten Seifert completing the top 10. Moving on to our next page of results then. 11th place for Dana Bowles, Frederik Neptune in P12, P13 for Niko Heinen, Michael Haflidason sitting in P14 after a late drama, of course, in the race. Josh Brain in P15, which we saw a little bit earlier on the broadcast. Dan Schuring P16, Wojciech Podacek getting turned around earlier on in the race in P17, Johan van den Belt with the hardware failure we saw a little bit earlier on in P18, and Tony Hayes 19th and last did not take the start. That completes your race result as Aussie is here with the interviews along with your race winner for this week, Jeff Randall.
No, he's not. He came in second place though. It was a very good race still, Jeff.
Sorry.
I think you're wishing you were the race winner, but nobody could catch Phillip Hammer today. However, before we go to the interview proper, I want to talk about that car. Lotus 49 inspired. Any particular reason for that?
I just love it. It's such a good-looking thing. It takes me back to my youth when I was watching these cars running around the track. Fabulous things.
Oh my! So you've been around for a couple of years then, because that was a long time ago. Well, not a long time ago, but you still got it in terms of racing. So second place here. A real big battle pack late on in the race, actually early on in the race, as well as late on in the race. You had a lot of great drivers there fighting against you, Haflidason and Burns and Crowder and a couple of other guys too. How were you able to make it out on top in that one?
Well, by a fair bit of luck and quite a lot of pit strategy, I suppose, trying to do a fair bit of fuel saving. David made an amazing job in closing 4 seconds on the second pit stop. I was 4 seconds in front going into the pits, and half a second in front of him when we came out. But he's very good at that. You know, he's well versed at good pit strategies. But regarding the other guys, I mean, I think Terry had a couple of incidents, took a couple of people. Well, took Michael out, which was unlucky. But yeah, I've just had a lot of fun here. Last week it was in the officials, and I've enjoyed it. It's been a good track for me.
I think you're one of those drivers that pretty much hails from that island in the North Atlantic, which would be the United Kingdom. And so, Jeff, I always thought that Barber is the one track that got displaced from somewhere in England or Scotland maybe, and got just moved to Alabama without anyone noticing. It's a very British style track, only a little bit wider. Was that maybe one of the reasons for your good performance here?
Hard to say. I mean, when you're talking about the likes of Knock Hill and Alton Park, they're both fairly tight and twisty. Barber, I think it just suits the Skippy really well. It flows, and it's got some exciting corners when you're in a Skippy, no doubt. You know, you're on the edge with the thing all the time, pretty much. But it's good fun. It's really suits the car. It suits my driving style as well.
It does, and you can see that in your confidence when you were driving, as well as the final results. Second place, Jeff Randall. Anyone you would like to thank? I will thank you for the interview, but anyone you would like to thank for your result today?
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure. Thanks so much for the broadcast. You guys do a fantastic job, and it's always good to sit and watch it back and see what happened everywhere else. And obviously to Wojtek for hosting this thing, and and to all the other drivers for making it so much fun. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jeff. It was an absolute pleasure, and congratulations for a great finish.
Thank you so much.
So that's Jeff Randall finishing second today, and next up we will have our final podium finisher, who is David Burns. And David, first of all, I want to get to the last of all, and that's the last lap. A little bit of an incident there with Terry. How was that from your perspective?
I don't like to say things, but felt a little aggressive. Not sure he realised I was on the outside, so shoving me off the track wasn't particularly welcome. And having seen what had gone on before, Not too sure that's warranted in our league, but we're admins. We'll look at it after the race. But I had a fun race nonetheless.
Yeah, you seem to have fun, and you had a bit of a choice to make in those final laps, because to me it looked like you were content with following the duo ahead of you, maybe sitting in that fourth place for quite a while and then seeing what happens. Were you concerned that there was going to be perhaps some contact between Haflidason and Randall, or maybe between Terry and one of those guys, which ended up happening, and were just taking it easy? Or was that more like, well, you just don't want to try too hard for an overtake?
I'm just using my usual strategy of trying to save fuel, but yeah, I was a little concerned. But I know Michael from previous races, and I actually said to him afterwards, Michael, you were thinking as you were racing. I can't read you when you think. He was actually playing a much longer game, so it was harder to read him. But Terry, Terry, a little too aggressive for my liking, I think.
Yeah, you have aggressive drivers, and then you have drivers who are aggressive in overtaking, and you have drivers who are aggressive just with their driving style. Like Michael, I think he's become an instant crowd favorite with his sliding sideways thing. So, David, you and the rest of the field have a little bit of homework to do for the rest of the season. How are you going to catch up to Phillip Hammer?
With great difficulty, that man. He just seems to get faster. In fact, I swear he's got a V8 in the back of that Skippy or something like that, because he really is uncatchable. It really is a case of being able to hold on to his draft, because he is so phenomenally fast. I'm just going to have to work harder. I have to put it on the grid P2. It's my only chance.
Yep, more practice, work harder, those will yield great benefits. Somebody said that to me once, actually. I think it was Nim Cross who said that once to me, that, are you sure that you don't have a V8 in the back of your Skippy? No, they just can't drive. Anyway, so, hello Nim. So, anyway, anyone you would like to thank for the race, David?
Yourself, as always, my fellow admins for helping us put on the league, and just everyone that shows up. We always have a great race, even when things go wrong.
Thank you very much for the interview, David, and congratulations for the podium finish. And that's David Burns, and we'll get back to the booth with Thomas Mengossi, as he has a couple of words to say before we close this one out.
Well, thank you very much to you, Ozzy, and of course, thank you very much to Jeff Randall and to David J. Burns for taking a bit of time for the interviews. Man, it's been a really good race to say here. And yeah, to be fair, I can't wait to see the next one. And for those of you who are wondering, yes, this is kind of like a bit of a first for me, coming from another scene to cast sim racing. And to be fair, I'm bitten by the bug. I want to do more. So thank you very much to the companies that provide the software and hardware for our broadcasts here, listed on the screen. Also, additional thanks to June Lalonde, who provides our wonderful music. See the screen for how to get a hold of more of her great work. Thank you to the team today, Ozzy, Joe, and Dougie. You can find more info about GSRC at globalsimracingchannel.com or through our social media. Also, please check out our merchandise store over at gsrc.storenvy.com. We'll keep a link in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel as well, so you won't miss any moment here on the GSRC. Next race for the Absolute Beginners League is heading towards Spa-Francorchamps, le Toboggan des Ardennes, as we say in French. We'll host round 3 on April the 17th at 2 p.m. Eastern. Make sure to be there. We also have upcoming races for other series listed on the screen, so make sure to check those out and mark them down on your calendar. Up next is the major series. It's Jimmy Bryan 200 at Phoenix Speedway at 8 p.m. Eastern. Until next time, race clean, race hard, and we'll see you on the track.